Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you on a week-to-week basis from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking around the globe for those 1,000 best practices, the technology, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And we're going across 144 different nations looking for those best practices, what we call the best of the best, and how we're going to be able to advance the environment, but also the economy as we move towards 2050. And I have a gentleman sitting right beside me that's actually been doing both of these in a very proactive and I can say aggressive in a very positive way. The work that he's been doing in Washington, D.C. This is the Honorable Tommy Wells. He is the Director, Washington, D.C. Department of Energy and Environment, DOEE. And Tommy, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for the mission and what Emerald Planet does. That sharing best practices, helping us communicate with other jurisdictions around the country and seeing what other folks are doing. It's a very important mission, especially today. And thank you for your leadership and for thinking about doing this to begin with.
Well, I think it's just absolutely fantastic what you're doing. And when we're looking at best practices, we look at the DOEE as a best practice. I mean, you're doing literally hundreds of best practices, but the department itself is a best practice. But looking at the mission and the vision, what is it all about at DOEE?
Well, we are I'm like the Secretary of Environment for a state, but also head of Natural Resources, State Energy Office, Office of Sustainability, and I'm the Game Warden. So all that wrapped together is the responsibility of DC, just like a state, to protect the environment, to protect our residents, to create healthy communities, and also to continue to be sure that our air is clean and that our water is getting better. And we also are involved in energy. That energy policies become very local. We've got the grid going both ways now with solar power being generated on people's homes and feeding power back into the grid.
Right.
And so a lot of local policy around that as well. So the Department of Energy and the Environment, it started off as the Department of Environment, but now you really can't separate energy from the environment. So that's who we are and that's what we do.
Yeah, and we have a program within the Emerald Planet, is the Power for Peace. And power is really going to bring peace. And we have to do that. And that's what you're doing. That's right. And putting all these solar panels, in Ward 8, Ward 7, economically challenged areas, but all of a sudden people are becoming independent. They can take money that they will be putting into energy and allocating that to college, university, improving the community. I think it's fantastic what you're doing and what you're encouraging. But looking at the Wildlife Action Plan, when we were talking about the themes, that was not one I was really thinking of, but yet it's really near and dear to your heart. You talk about being the game warden, but yet it's very, very important because these critters really are almost the canary in the coal mine. Tell us about that.
Well, thank you. In 2015, we adopted the State Wildlife Action Plan for Washington, D.C. And as you can imagine, we are the only jurisdiction that is completely urban to have a wildlife action plan. And when you think about cities, usually you think about how do you get the wildlife out of your city. We're kind of entering a new stage, some people call it second nature, where we're rewilding streams. We're cataloging what animals, what reptiles, what fish are here. We used camera traps. So we actually know what's coming through the district. We have over 250 to 270 species of birds that come through Washington, D.C. that migrate through our city, and our city's on the migration plan.
Yeah. Just like the monarch butterfly. Migrates right through Washington, D.C.
That, we have to capture stormwater, but in a best practice, you use indigenous plants to support animals and wildlife that evolved here. So where my office is, downtown, we put in milkweed. And I can be in a meeting 7 floors up, and I'll see a monarch butterfly fly by. And it's a different way to think about how do you protect, preserve nature, and bring nature back into the city very intentionally. For example, we have a number of citizen science projects. During the summer, we have staff that go out, and we invite citizens to go with them, and they put up mist nets, and they capture bats. And we're looking for the bats in DC that come through DC or that are in DC that have the white nose syndrome.
Right.
And so we're trying to be part of that citizen science. But we found the long-eared brown bat right here, in our capital, and we do have a healthy bat population. It's pretty exciting. We also have spotted turtles. We've got the marbleback salamander. We've got the hayspring amphipod on Rock Creek. It's the only place in the whole world you can find the hayspring amphipod. And it's about the size of half your fingernail, lives in seeps. It's not that attractive, doesn't have eyes, it's kind of translucent, but we have a duty to protect that.
Right.
We know that it's there. And so in Washington, D.C., we also, one of the most hopeful things that I think we have as a city is that in our whole nation, we were down to 500 nesting pairs of eagles. And in Washington, we had not had eagles nesting here for at least 50 years. And now we're on our 4th generation of an eagle family living in the Arboretum. They've had eaglets each time, and they have successfully moved on to maturity. And so these eagles, they're feeding solely on the Anacostia River. Now, the Anacostia River is an urban river where you think about pesticides, DDT, PCBs, all those bad things that happen in a city. But as we kind of take care of our natural habitat within an urban area, you can have your nation's symbol return, and they're on the top end of the food chain. They're eating everything else in between, and they're healthy. And so that's very exciting.
Yeah, and looking at these photographs here, I'd say it's just absolutely fantastic, the diversity as far as the wildlife that you have in the city. And to think that, to be this forward-thinking about the wildlife, because again, that goes to the health, the beauty, and also the whole ecosystem within a city. So when you're looking at that, what are some of the things that you're thinking about as far as your policy through this wildlife development plan,
Sam,
that allows you to really move forward in a very proactive way to enhance wildlife, as you're saying, rewilding the city?
That's a great question. 3 of the things that we've done, just to list some of them. One is, early on we worked with the mayor and said, you know what, we don't have to mow all these areas around some of the highway turnarounds or exchanges that are just large patches of grass where no one's going to play. It's not a park. So we said, how about we turn them into meadows? And what we do is one way to do it is you put black tarps over the ground. Everything dies underneath. You reseed it with indigenous species of flowers and other things, and you let it just grow back as a meadow. And so the things, the butterflies, the different insects, the animals that evolved, really eating and being a part of that meadow creates a whole ecosystem back. And of course we put signs up that says, meadow at work, saving this much carbon from the atmosphere, and other things about it of what they'll find in there in terms of species, so people think we're not just not paying attention or lazy and not mowing this lawn they're used to being mowed. So meadowing, I think, as a best practice, it's become a verb. I think we'll meadow that.
Right.
And so kind of teaching the other agencies that are responsible for these things, and they're a little nervous, they'll get complaints about all these things growing up, has been a very interesting process, but it's a best practice, and we're meadowing more and more land in DC as we go forward. Another is that we've got some streams that go through areas and parks where they were put back into big pipes years ago. And we do what's called daylighting. And we've daylighted some streams where we take the pipes out, make the land or where the water goes serpentine again, and then smooth out the sides so that when it rains heavy, that the water comes up and then naturally goes back into the water table. What we found is that the water table underneath the aquifer has gotten recharged quickly when we've done that. And so that creates and holds water for aquifers throughout the whole region. in case there's a drought or some other thing like that. Well, when we rewilded a stream in the Arboretum along the Anacostia River, a lot of these drainage ditches that used to be streams, they straightened them out. A lot of rain and they just get, dug out with the rain, they get deep. Where we rewilded that stream, made it serpentine again, smoothed down the sides. Even before we started throwing logs on there and getting it replanted, fish started coming up the stream.
It's amazing how they'll come back to their natural habitat.
Waterfowl came back.
Mm-hmm.
It's and people love that.
Right.
As you know, the whole biophilic movement, people love to have wild life around them. I think the third major one would be trees. Mm-hmm. We have a goal to having 40% of the city be covered in a tree canopy. Mm-hmm. We used to be known as the city of trees. And what happened is you had Dutch elm disease. Now we have the emerald ash borer, and we've had the chestnut blight, and the city lost a lot of its trees. And then we had so much development. Now we're back. We're probably around 35%, but we're planting about 11,000 trees a year. Mm-hmm. And our goal is to plant them in good places, try to as much as possible, mm-hmm. make them indigenous so that the bugs and the animals can come back. And I think really recreating a tree canopy for a city, people feel better. People say trees are magic. They reduce crime, they improve mental health, they make your house cost, value more. You do all sorts of magical things with just a tree.
Yeah. And our Rotary Club, as you know, is very active in that with the trees for the Capitol. And about 400 of those cherry trees down at the tidal basin all come from our Rotary Club.
Wow.
And then, as you know, with the Farragut North, where we had the Icebox Challenge, mm-hmm. About 65% of those trees came out of the Rotary Club. So there's a lot of civic organizations like Rotary International that's really working with you and also the National Park Service to bring this back.
That's exactly right.
But looking at this picture here, this is one of the things you're talking about, these nesting birds that you have, and we're just about out of time. What is this as a symbol for the city and where you're going over the next 5, 10, or 15 years just based on this photograph?
That's an osprey, and as you can tell, it's in something that's very metal. That's something that you would find in a city or on a bridge. But the osprey has readapted. We have osprey in the city. They're magical birds themselves, mm-hmm. or majestic birds to see. And they migrate and come back, and we always look forward to their return each year. And they are a beautiful bird.
And what do you see for the future of the city, 5, 10, and 15 years, as far as rewilding the whole city? We've got to be quick.
We've reclaimed and created a wilderness preserve on Kingman Island on the Anacostia River. We're going to have people swimming, fishing in the Anacostia River. We're going to really be a place again where the
Tommy Wells as we create the Emerald Planet.
This is the story of a boy who is very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. It made him feel uncomfortable. One day, he found out he had something called autism. His family got him help, and slowly, he learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
What do you think you're doing, Kevin?
Was just gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
Like hearing voices?
Like your text-to-emoji ratio?
Oh man, the selfies. Selfie, nailed it.
We all have warning signs that let us know that we're probably not okay to drive. Mine is pretending to be your subconscious.
Craig, come on man, let's put a ride home.
Being a dad is an adventure full of special moments.
A cruise?
Surprise!
Unexpected moments.
I got this.
And even awkward moments.
Okay, Dad, thank you.
But every moment you spend with your kids, even the smallest moments, can make the biggest impact on your child's life. So take a moment to be a dad today.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
we're back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome as we're talking about the Anacostia River, the Potomac, Washington, D.C., these areas in the mid-Atlantic of the United States, and why it's so important that you take something that's a very densely populated, very densely developed area, but yet you're focusing on wildlife, you're focusing on the rivers, all the natural habitat that you have in those areas, and how do you bring that and match that to a very urban landscape? And a gentleman sitting right beside me, this is the Honorable Tommy Wells, and he's the Director of the Department of Energy and Environment, DOEE, in Washington, D.C., and he's actually charged with doing all these things, and as he says, he's also the game warden for the city. But Tommy, it's just exciting what's going on in Washington, D.C., and how you really are taking the environment, the economy, and community development, a very diverse community and a very tightly packed area, and yet you really are, in many ways, rewilding much of this, and at the same time, you're bringing green to the city. So how do you do all of that and make it work in a very tightly compact urban area?
Well, thank you, Sam, and thank you for Emerald City. I think it's a great way for us to learn from each other, and your vision, your leadership with this is very important, and it could not be at a more important time. And in sharing that, a lot of what we're doing at the Department of Energy and Environment in Washington, D.C. is it's what's expected of our citizens, it's what's expected of the residents and those that support our mayor, and it's what's expected by our mayor, that we are bringing, we're not just bringing nature back into our cities, we're embracing the nature that we have here. And we're learning how to clean it up, because when the nature around us is healthy, we're healthy. And as our Mayor Muriel Bowser often says, is what's good for the environment is good for our economy. And as soon as you realize that, then these investments are not just, throwing money after, things that don't matter. It's stuff that really does matter. And so the Anacostia River is one of our greatest assets in our city, along with we've been known as the City of Trees, and we're trying to bring that back. And also we've got other assets, whether it be Rock Creek Park, we're along the Potomac River, but we have more green space, more outdoor area per capita than any other city in the country. And we need to embrace that, and we also have to be good stewards for that, and really help the animals, the fish, and the wildlife that live here, and the ones that can come back here.
Yeah, and you think about the millions of people that come to Washington, D.C. every year. Of course, they're coming to the mall, they're coming to the museums and all that. But during the summer months, even in the dead of winter, people are just roaming around in natural spaces that we have. And so you have, the country's front yard, which is the mall, but the city itself really is the front yard for the United States. So you're expanding that, but yet the Potomac really is the signature river as far as Washington, D.C., but you've really taken almost a laser focus for the Anacostia. Why?
Well, you're right. Potomac River is famous. It's a border river for us. We own to the opposite bank. We own the water of the Potomac, but we share that responsibility with other states. The Anacostia River, the main stem of the whole river, is in Washington, D.C. entirely. 9 miles of the river, we own both sides. We have residents, people that interact with the river, 9 miles of river. And this river has been known historically as one of the 10 most impaired rivers in the world. Well, certainly in America. And restoring this river, it's not just about stewardship, but it's also getting people for it to be a place to be, to get people to go back and fish, swim, boat, kayak, view it as an asset for where they live. If you can, take time off, say at lunch from work, and go fish at the banks of the Anacostia, then go back to work, you just feel better.
Right.
If you can take your children down to the river, the Anacostia, take them in a kayak or canoe and show them the wildlife, but you really didn't have to leave town. You could just bike down there, and now it's got some of the best bike paths in the country are along the Anacostia River. It's an extraordinary asset. You look at other great cities like Minneapolis, they have lakes all downtown and it's part of their life. We had ignored the Anacostia River. Now that we're re-embracing it, it's really enhancing what Washington is to our local folks, but also it's becoming a national destination.
Yeah, and look at this photograph here. You have, one of the most modern sports stadiums, in the United States, and yet you're right beside the river. People are out there in the daytime enjoying that, and you have, all this greenery around there, which is a giant carbon sump, which we need to do as far as urban areas, but we're putting that all back into nature. And so looking at that, having all this great infrastructure, but embracing the river, what was kind of the philosophy of through City Council and the citizens of, instead of moving away from the river, which was going on for generations, moving back to the river?
I think it's been a process of rediscovery that when I became director of the Department of Energy and Environment, I had my agency purchase an aluminum canoe, 17-foot, green, that I used to take local dignitaries and elected officials out on the Anacostia River. I reserve every Friday morning to put someone in that canoe to take them up the river, and you're welcome to be on one of those Friday morning river
certainly will take advantage.
So I've taken council members that grew up in Washington, D.C., that are multi-generational, in a canoe to show them the Anacostia River. And they'll say, this is the first time I have ever been on the river, and I didn't know how beautiful it was going north of the river towards Bladensburg, where you've got Kenilworth Gardens on one side and you have the Arboretum on the other. You could be anywhere in the most beautiful wilderness area in the country and not realize you're in the city until one of the trains go by. So it's that's one way that we get our elected officials to reinvest in the river. And now the greatest challenge is that we're going to have to clean the sediment up. The sediment is really the repository of all the bad things we've done over time. We've got one of the oldest naval bases in the country is right there on the Anacostia River. Well, when they made munitions and they did things, they just would dump it in the river. It's next to a power plant. The power plant did what other power plants did, and they dumped PCBs into the river. We used to use DDT, and the architect of the Capitol would grow plants for the areas all around the city, and they used DDT and chlordane because of fire ants, and all that washed into the river. So now we've taken large tubes, put them down into the river, pull them up, large plastic tubes, laid them out on tables, take an X-Acto knife, slice them open, and the first thing you do is you sniff along the pipe. And when you smell something that's petroleum, you stop, you have it tested, and you see what else is there. If you get a bubblegum wrapper, like a Bazooka Joe wrapper, or a piece of newspaper or something, or an old golf ball, it tells you when that happened. And then you look at the records and see...
That's like ice cores, in the Arctic or the Antarctic. It's the very same thing.
And then you look at who owned that property nearby when that went in there. So we can hold people accountable so that together, if someone says, well, this is going to cost a lot of money to clean up, we'll have the folks that helped us pollute the river clean it up with us. There used to be a major trash dump. The city dump used to be right on the Anacostia River. A little boy was playing there in the late 60s, and he fell into a burning pit there, and he died. And it got everyone's attention. They realized this idea of environmental justice, closed down the dump. But now it's capped with dirt, but we've got to clean everything up. And people are excited about it. And the folks that go there, and now that they can fish, and you saw the kayaking there, then they also see the bad stuff in the river, and they say, we should do something about this. And so creating more stakeholders of the river is certainly one way that we get people excited about cleaning it up and returning this asset to all of us.
Now looking at this, you really are trying to get all the solid waste out of the river.
Yep.
And you have different techniques for doing that. We're going to show a few photographs of that. But what are some of the main techniques for doing that, and how does that really improve the river as far as the water quality, not just removing the solid waste?
Like a lot of cities, especially older cities, we had a combined sewer overflow problem. The combined sewer system that included stormwater runoff with your sewage treatment meant that you were treating your stormwater, which was healthy and good, but they didn't know cities were going to get so big, so that when more gets into the system, it just overflows and puts sewage into the waterways. So we're putting in about 17 miles of tunnel, just rainwater capture underneath the rivers, And we've just opened about 7 miles of tunnel underneath the Anacostia River. It's held back billions of sewage that would have gone into the river. We've had so much rain, the rainiest November in history pretty much. And so that's one way, is to remediate the combined sewer overflow problem. You know, again, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, all the East Coast cities have had this problem. The other is you rewild streams. You take drainage ditches that pull sediment into the river and you make them act like streams like they used to where the sediment stays where it is. When the water fills up, it just goes back into the ground, and it still goes, you know, the water still makes it to the river, but not so heavily sedimented. And then the other thing we do is that we try to control the trash. You'll see some of those pictures of like that trash trap right there. The trash trap is that for the trash that comes through the sewer system, off the roads, off parking lots, get caught in the trash trap. And we pay for these trash traps with our 5-cent bag fee. That single-use disposable bags, if you take one, it costs you a nickel, and we collect about $2 to $2.5 million a year, and we put it back into education and then putting out trash traps to try to capture trash before it gets into the river. We have a lot more work to do, but the payoff is extraordinary. You know, we have fully restored the shad to the Potomac River. Now we're working on restoring the shad to the Anacostia River. The American shad is America's fish. If it weren't for the shad run, George Washington may have never gotten out of Valley Forge. That it's an American fish, it's important to our history, and restoring the shad to first the Potomac and now the Anacostia is a great story for our country.
And looking at this is a great story too of how you're taking all this trash that's collected, you know, around these green areas and actually removing all of that and then restoring these areas. And so what do you think for the next 5, 10 to 15 years, how the expansion as far as removing the sediment from the Anacostia River?
Well, already the river's starting to bounce back. That one of the things that's incredibly exciting about this work, sometimes you forget the power of nature. Nature will heal itself if you give it an opportunity. So as we're starting to pull trash out, as we are filtering water naturally before it gets back into the river, as we really create better practices, nature takes over too. And the river's coming back, and it'll be a great, beautiful place to be.
Yeah, and looking at this, trash-free DC, letting the citizens claim, you know, these areas that are accessing into the river is absolutely fantastic. Thank you for being with us, dear viewers, as we're looking and talking with Tommy Wells about how we improve the Anacostia as we create the Emerald Planet.
Every time I hear the alarm bell go off in school, I think it's an air raid.
A lot of houses in our neighborhood have been destroyed. I like to close my ears and sing songs whenever the bombs come close.
I'm worried our new neighbors won't like us.
But I know it's all gonna be worth it. I just want my family to be safe. But these are not my words.
These are not my words.
These are not my words.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent. Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
When it comes to saving money,
What?
don't act like a baby.
Oh, it's like they're having their own little meeting.
This is so humiliating.
Be the boss.
I'm the boss.
What the?
Power nap.
You were saying.
And make a budget.
Let's get to work.
Need a little help?
Stacy, read back the notes.
I can't read.
What's it say?
Create a personalized savings plan and get other tools and tips
We can share.
You obviously didn't go to business school.
at feedthepig.org.
Hello, I'm Dr. Sam Hancock of Emerald Planet TV, and we're coming to you from Washington, D.C. as we look around the globe in 144 different nations, looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And we've interviewed people from over 103 countries now, but yet we're sitting right in Washington, D.C. And really, Washington, D.C. itself is a best practice, even though it represents dozens and hundreds of best practices as far as the environment, economy, and community development. And I'm sitting right beside the gentleman who's actually the head of all this and making it happen. This is Tommy Wells. He's the director of the Department of Energy and Environment, DOEE, in Washington, D.C. Tommy, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for hosting and leading and really being the genius of Emerald Planet. There's not a more important time in our planet to provide this kind of leadership and helping us learn from each other about best practices without having to be in each other's countries. So
well,
thank you.
Well, no, it's a great pleasure being here, and you honor us by joining us. But looking at buildings, many people, we think about transportation, trucks and cars and buses and all that as, you know, the major polluters. And we look at all these other kinds of things. But very few people know that buildings really are our number one polluters and the emitters of greenhouse gases. But yet in Washington, D.C., you've really taken this focus on, you know, green energy efficiency and to clean up the environment as well as planting trees and cleaning the rivers and all that. So this building energy performance standard, what is it and why is it so important, not just to Washington, D.C., but a best practice through across the United States and around the globe?
Thank you, Sam. Sam, as you know, that climate change is happening, and it's happening because the Earth is warming because of greenhouse gases, carbon being burned. And buildings, we've learned, really account for almost 70% of the greenhouse gases causing global warming on the planet. And currently 50% of the world's population lives in cities. And so we expect in 20, 25 years, that'll move up to 70%. And so cities are the problem, but frankly, cities are also the solution. In America, 63% of America's population lives in cities. So DC is a city that's much like other cities in America. 74% of greenhouse gases that are caused by Washington, D.C. is caused by our built environment, from our buildings. And we're a city where we build buildings and we like them to last a while. So you can have great building codes, but we're not going to be tearing our buildings down and building from scratch, especially in Washington. So we have to think about how do we retrofit our buildings because they're causing the problem or the main problem. And so I've talked with my counterparts in New York City, LA, Seattle, saying, guys, what are we going to do? They have the same problem. It's the built environment that we have to retrofit. So the DC City Council has introduced a bill that will require building energy performance standards, meaning that you have to operate your building to a certain level. It's kind of like saying, we know you bought your car a long time ago, but you're going to have to get this kind of mileage, and each year that mileage has to get better. So to do that, we have to help the building owners. We have a lot of our lowest performing buildings, what's called Class B or C buildings, are multifamily buildings with affordable housing. They don't have a lot of capital laying around. They can't charge a lot more money. So what we do is that we're also, with this bill that's in front of the council, that the mayor, it's really supporting the mayor's Clean Energy DC plan, and you can go to our website at doee.dc.gov. The Clean Energy DC plan has building energy performance requirements in it. This bill puts it through, but it generates $100 million for our new Green Bank. The Green Bank will help fund the retrofits, especially for the buildings where the owners don't have the money up front. Then the savings of their energy will help pay the money back.
Yeah.
And so that's really the holy grail, is rebuilding, or certainly taking the built environment and getting better mileage out of your vehicles.
How are you going to be tracking that? You know,
Well,
people say these are nice things to say, these are the goals, this is the mission, these are great platitudes, but the taxpayer is going to say, how do we know this is really happening?
Great question. We have something called Energy Star, and Energy Star reporting tells you how a building's doing. What's the score of the building for the previous year? So the past 6 years, we've required all the buildings in DC to report their energy scores. The past 3 years, we fine them if they don't report their score. So we have...
So there's real teeth in this rule and regulation to saying that you're going to do this because it's for the benefit of the whole city and all the citizens that live here.
Exactly right. If you know, as it said, you've got to be able to measure in order to manage.
Right.
And so if we're going to manage to better performance standards, we're measuring it. And so we do it through the Energy Star performance standards. And I believe that it will really, we're the first city will have the first jurisdiction in the country to have passed this. But I want to say again, we're working closely with LA, New York, and our sister cities across the country. We believe it's a model for the world. And we believe that we're going to be able to really get at one of the worst causes of the greenhouse gases.
Linda from Farmville, Virginia called in and she wants to know, what does it really mean that Washington, D.C. is the world's first LEED Platinum city? And what the platinum, gold, silver, what does that really mean? And then why is that so important to Washington, D.C.? Because you hear this over and over and over.
Well, we certainly have a federal government that has taken a back seat in addressing climate change. So we're a city of over 700,000 people. We're a major city within the area. If you add in the suburbs, we're about 5 million people. And so it's important, it was very important to the mayor that as soon as the president said he was going to pull out of the Paris Agreement, our mayor led a delegation of mayors from America to Mexico City to speak to the mayors across the world, to say we're still in it. One election doesn't change our values. And so we're going to still meet the requirements of the Paris Accords from COP21. So what it means for us is that we have, it's got to be more than plans, but we have plans for sustainable DC, and how we're going to have a sustainable city. We have plans for clean energy DC, and we also have plans for resiliency for the city. And what that, it's Climate Ready DC is that plan. So we're implementing those plans, but what does that mean to implement? We've added more green roofs to our buildings for the past 4 years than any other city. We have more LEED projects per capita than any city in the country. But also, we've got, besides the Energy Star performance standards, besides green roofs, as we have talked about before, the progress we're making on planting trees to cool our city, to clean our air. And again, it's not just plans, it's budgets, it's implementation, and it's through partnerships with our citizens groups like your Rotary Club to really make the city healthy, green, and clean, and to cool it down. And so that's why we're a LEED Platinum city. And I think the last thing about that is you've got to capture the data. And we have one of the best systems for measuring almost everything we do in order to have the data so we can manage the city.
Yeah, and looking at this photograph right here, this is the mayor, members of the city council, yourself, many others in the community are coming out and really launching, but at the same time really emphasizing what LEED is, why it's so important and all that. Why is it so important that the members of city council, the mayor, yourself, and others are constantly out there, literally on a day-to-day basis, and leading this city forward? What's the momentum, and what is the long-term impact of that kind of hands-on involvement from yourself, the mayor, and the city council?
Well, let me say that I appreciate the mayor's leadership so much, along with the council members that are doing this as well, understanding that the situation is urgent, and it's not just plans, it's implementation. And there is, there's always concerns, well, is this going to cost more? Are we going to have to use more money to do this? In the long run, it creates its own economy. What's good for the environment, as the mayor says, is good for the economy, and it'll pay for itself. But initially, there's sums of money that has to be paid. That picture was of a LEED certified school, and it operates at a lower energy cost than almost any other school in the country. And so I think the other part is why it's so important to have your government behind you is we have to train people to manage these buildings. It's once you put in the technology and the hardware, it's just like buying someone a computer. You got to learn how to operate it.
Right.
And so that's a new opportunity of jobs, new opportunity of skilled jobs, as our mayor says, a pathway to the middle class. And politicians like that. They like seeing their residents not only work, but get good jobs. we have a solar program. Solar jobs is the fastest growing job market in America. And so we have a program where we put free solar panels on residents' roofs that are low income, but they own their homes. And we do it with training people of how to do it. So after they do this, after about 6 months, they get hired into these new businesses that are putting solar out. So it's a great way to create a circular economy and at the same time really be good stewards of the planet, lower greenhouse gases, be a LEED Platinum city. And politicians like that. They like to brag.
Right.
When we first got here, LA had 6 more Energy Star buildings than we did, and that was 3.5 years ago. Then we passed them for 2 years, and this past year they just passed us. And so
the competition goes on.
It's a matter of hometown pride.
Yeah, yeah. Looking at this roof, there's many things going on in this roof right here. This is truly a green roof, but it's more than just solar panels. It's more than just green plants on there. There's a number of different things happening here. And we're going to use this as a way to exit out of this particular segment. But what other dynamics are going on here, like the stormwater and all these other things?
Well, now whenever you rebuild a building or build a new building, you have to capture stormwater on site. By capturing it on site, it gets filtered before it gets into our rivers. But we also want to encourage you to generate solar energy on top of your roof. A lot of our developers are saying, well, which is it? Can you do both? Well, that picture tells you, yes, you can do both.
Actually, you're doing 3 things, at least in this, and actually probably if you look at the energy efficiency and cooling of the building, you got 4th dynamics going on.
Well, that's right, and also we're a flyway for migratory birds. They have a place to stop and eat and rest. It does a lot, and it helps to, what some people call, bring back the second nature to our cities. But the other part is it does show energy stewardship. You're exactly right. And in our city, the only available real estate we have for solar are building roofs.
Right.
And so we're having to deploy solar across our roofs.
Tommy, we're going to have to go out. This photograph right here says it all. The solar panels, you got the Capitol in the background. What's the balance, and what do you see for the next 5, 10, or 15 years?
Well, we want to get 5% of the city's energy from solar by 2032. And now there's talk saying, can we get that up to 10%, where the whole city's energy is generated by solar on top of our roofs. We've got a lot to do. We can get geothermal out of our sewer pipes. We can take cooling off our rivers. Energy is not just electricity.
Tommy Wells, DOEE, as we create the Emerald Planet.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. Already posted it.
I got a crick in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. But I don't wanna get on. It's very sad all that I can do was remember you. You know I usually say no, but if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes. I mean,
Right?
like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
back to the Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
I thought we had 12 minutes.
Welcome to the Emerald Planet. We're coming to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking around the globe for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, services, and products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And we're looking at this balance as far as the economy, the environment, and community development. Looking at from the standpoint of Washington, D.C. as the nation's capital city is a best practice in its own. And this is really because of the fantastic leadership of the mayor, the city council, but the gentleman sitting right beside me really is the spark plug for this engine. This is the Honorable Tommy Wells. He's the director of the Department of Energy and Environment. And we're going to be talking about something called product stewardship in this particular segment. What does that really mean, and why is product stewardship so important as far as what's going on?
Well, thank you, Sam, and thank you for Emerald Planet. It's just what a brilliant way to share best practices across the world. And as you know, people learn something in one area, and it's a great way to share that in another. And I think that there's not a better, more important time for a show like Emerald Planet. Thank you for your leadership. So product stewardship is just simply a way to say that if you make money off making products and there's a problem after people are done with it, you who made the money off it should help us figure out what to do with it. So we have paint stewardship, where the paint manufacturers have joined together to have places where you can drop off your paint, because you rarely use every bit of the paint in the can when you paint. And so what do you do with it? Instead of sending it to the landfills, they're going to help take it and then recycle it. And then there's electronics, that we've had this explosion since solid state to computer chip, where it seems like you can buy a TV and it's obsolete within 2 years. Mm-hmm. So people want to know what to do with those products. So now the electronic manufacturers have to take the product back, and then they do things that are very responsible. They help recycle the plastic. They take it apart. They take the components out, and especially the special minerals and the things that are in there that can be reused. Right. That's an important thing. So that's the next part is, what do we do about single-use plastics? I know that, when I won't say how old I am, but when I was coming up, we didn't have single-use bags. We had paper bags. Straws were paper, and certainly when we had bottles that you reused or had deposits with. But with single-use plastics, and now with the plastic, people looking at the large, floating mat of plastic in the ocean, certainly plastics, bottles and such in our streams and our rivers and in our beautiful areas that we're very proud of in our country. We're a nation of forests and state parks and national parks. Seeing all this plastic in our environment is startling, and it hasn't always been that way. So I was the author in DC when I was a councilman on the 5-cent bag bill. Single-use plastic, the whole point of the 5 cents wasn't to raise money. It's simply to get someone to ask you, do you need a bag with that? If you're about to buy batteries for your camera, if you're a tourist, that bag's gone the moment you get the battery pack. So have someone say, do you need a bag with that? Because if not, if you do, we're going to have to charge you a nickel. That's the whole point. Bag usage has gone down by 65% in DC. We've seen about a 65 to 70% reduction of finding single-use plastic bags in our rivers. It makes sense. So the other thing that we see is our straws. We go through billions of straws every day. Whether you want one or not, you go to the restaurant and everything has a straw in it. They're plastic. And because they're small, they're not really recyclable. The plastic itself is potentially recyclable, but they fall out of the machinery of our recycling machinery, and so they don't get recycled. So we're going to have to do something about that. And people are concerned across the world to say, do we really need all these plastic straws? Right. And so in DC, we're going to do something about it.
Yeah, and also bottles. There just happen to be a few right in this photograph right in front of us right now, but this is something that no matter where you go, you just see plastic bottles absolutely everywhere. And of course, DC Water is saying, forget the bottle, do the tap.
That's right.
I almost have it, fairly close. So, forget the bottle, do the tap. So how does that fit into the broader strategy of the whole city, where you have across departments really working together to make this a better, wholesome, environmentally conscious city.
Well, that's a great point, that especially now that even though plastic bottles are recyclable, it used to be done in China, and they're not taking it anymore. And it puts a large cost back on the city. Mm-hmm. We spend $16 million a year in DC just picking up trash that, like
how much is that?
bottles.
16 million?
16 million.
That's
just
incredible.
Picking up trash from our parks and from our, our gutters and such. it costs us money. So Coca-Cola has provided the lead in saying by 2030 that they will be accountable for all the packaging that they produce, or the equivalent, meaning they could take other packaging, but the equivalent. Right. They know exactly how much product they sell, so they know how much packaging that they need to be accountable for. So that's a movement towards stewardship. Pepsi and the other, Nestle and the others have similar statements in their mission statement, but I think it's time they stepped up. I think it's time that they worked with government. Instead of, it doesn't have to be a bottle deposit, even though they work well. These are the same companies that have done very well in not passing one in 30 years in any American state. So let's change the thought about if other manufacturers of paint, electronics, how can you also be a product steward for the packaging that's going into our environment? And I think that's the future.
Yeah, and looking at this, when I was in Richmond, I was very active with the Chamber of Commerce and many other organizations there. And Reynolds Metals was there, Reynolds Aluminum. And their claim was that they were recycling 120% of all the aluminum cans they produced, 120%. And so this goes to this, they were taking in aluminum cans from other manufacturers because they said it only takes 10% of the energy to produce a new can from recycles than, if we were taking it from raw alumina. So it really is a cost factor, but also it's a profit factor.
Well, I think that's a very good point. And what you see among young people that have become very aware that the planet we're leaving them is not, is not in the same shape as when we got it. You see young people with microbreweries and all that, they're drinking out of cans. They're not drinking out of bottles anymore. They understand that relationship, and you're exactly right. Aluminum cans it's a more responsible way to take your, when you buy, a soft drink or, water should be coming in that too. But you are right, that the aluminum is valuable, and the companies will want that product back so they can use it again. And that makes sense. But currently with plastic, that's not where we are.
Now, looking at this bridge, of course, this is probably from a flood, something like that. But why do we have to put up with this? I mean, as citizens within not only Washington, D.C., but around the globe, why do we have to put up with this, where you have all this trash, the bottles and everything else? Is how do we have an impact? And I know this is something you're leading the charge, with the manufacturers, but how do we get the citizens to be incensed enough to say, we're not going to do it, we're not going to put up with it anymore?
Well, it's a very good point. And the companies that make money off bottles have done an extraordinary job to avoid responsibility for their product. But you do see citizens rising up. And the current place that they're rising up is on straws, plastic straws. Across the country, there's been, take the pledge, ask people, do you need a straw with that? There's really a straw ban going on in a number of cities across America. I know that I go to restaurants like Founding Farmers. They will put literally a organic straw that they cut off a field into your drink. It's where the name straw came from. And so that's obviously biodegradable. Those are great. Paper's biodegradable. And so there are alternatives to the plastic straws. But I'm not saying don't have a plastic straw available for someone with a handicapping condition to where they need a straw. Don't ban it completely. We want to take care of those. And
again,
those
being responsible.
with being responsible. But seriously, when you provide water to me, the first thing I do when I sit down in a restaurant is I take the straw out because it gets in the way. And it's this constant creating trash together that a lot of citizens across the country no longer want to participate in. And they see the bridges like you're talking about. They see the trash. And if you're going to sell your product to the next generation, they're going to be angry if you do not take stewardship for the, for the problems you create.
Yeah, and looking at the plastic bags and all these other kinds of things, we're talking about recycling, but I noticed that there's new advertisements in the metro, in the buses, and the subways, saying you don't want any plastic bags in, the recyclable areas. Now this is something that's fairly new, and I know that you're going to start, having some rules and regulations concerning this as far as all the homeowners and businesses and all that. Why not the plastic there? What can we teach our audience, not only here but other places, about keeping the plastic out of the recyclables because of the contamination?
There's a video that was just done by Adam Ortiz, the Director of the Environment for Prince George's County. Find Prince George's County, Adam Ortiz, or Department of Environment, and look at the video because he tells you what's recyclable and what's not. And one of the things he tells you, because it's confusing, grocery stores that take bags back, they only take bags, and they can get those recycled. But if they go through the recycling plants where you put single stream recycling and you have those big machines, the bags gum up the machines. It's just like Virginia was the first to propose a bag fee, and it came out of rural Virginia. They didn't pass it because there's some conservative folks in Virginia that didn't like it, but it came out of the rural areas because it messes up their farm machinery.
Right.
And it does the same thing in recycling. It messes up the machinery. I know even boaters, it blows engines when it gets sucked up into the engines. Plastic bags really do mess with motorized, mechanized things. So unless you are only collecting those plastic bags, you don't really want it in single stream recycling. And there's too many products to be separating everything to not use single stream. Single stream, you get more participation than dividing it all up. And it's that's why the bags are treated differently.
Yeah. Okay, we're running out of time. We've got maybe 10 or 15 seconds. What do you see for DOEE? Where is it going over the next 5, 10, or 15 years? And we got to be quick.
I see that the product stewardship movement where we partner with corporations saying, look, be a partner with us, take responsibility for the products that you're making money off of. We're not going to just legislate and cost money. Let's work together because that's where their customers are and that's where our citizens are.
And looking at this photo, this is what we want. We want clean rivers. We want clean water. This is Salmi Wells, Director, Department of Energy and Environment, Washington, D.C. Thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
That this is the second bottle of water I've had in a year and a half.
That's it in a plastic.
I have a reusable glass in my bag, and I just decided that I was afraid of the timing. But I don't normally use
Me either, but when you have it like this, then that's what we're doing.
I'm with you.
Sometimes you gotta, just like the straw. Actually, I have a McDonald's straw. I love it. I've used it at least 100 times now. I carry it around in my car.
Oh, that's great. That's
One
great.
straw.
That's great.
And it's lasted. And the new straws are going to absolutely, they just implode because I want to drink my coffee out of the straw because it's too hot. It's 125, 130 degrees, McDonald's coffee. And
That's true. Now, when I was at, were you, I'm trying to remember, I see you at so many different things. Were you in San Francisco?
No.
Okay, so they gave out these.